take this thing off here?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't want to be up on a podium. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thanks for coming. This thing here is a lot of fun. You can sign up for it. There's another session that starts soon, and then the last session is in January, right before the caucuses. It ends, I think, before caucus night, and we'll have all kinds of new stuff in there in January. You can sign up for it. It's free, it's easy, and you don't really have to go in and spend a lot of time there. You can sign up and then jump around and look at things that you're interested in. You don't have to complete it. If you do a minimum amount of work, you can actually click on a button and download a really nice certificate suitable for framing that says that you participated in this massive open online class. So please do that. There's no obligation. I wanted to take just a couple of minutes, no jokes, because the guy who tells jokes comes later, and I was told that I was not allowed to do that, not allowed to steal any of his humor. But this is a very unusual year. I have been looking at presidential politics in the Iowa caucuses since 1970. So that pretty much is the entire period that we have had the modern caucuses. The first of those was in 1972 with George McGovern, and nobody paid much attention to it. But then the next year, Jimmy Carter won the Iowa caucuses, and that was the year that they became interesting to the news media. And after that, you know, it's all history because the news media really love to come to Iowa. They love to look at all of the quaint things that we have, the largest hog in the world, the state fair, the deep fried food, hay bales and other things that don't exist in the places that they come from. And I guess I wanted to share with you the fact that the Iowa caucuses are actually very difficult to understand. Now, after 45 years of doing this, my name is all over the place, and I get phone calls and emails and text messages from media from all over the world, and their biggest problem is they don't understand how this thing works. They don't have that in their country, and so I have to explain it to them. That's one reason why I created this free open online course, because it has some interviews and a little bit of background information on how the Iowa caucuses work and why they are so important in American politics, because they are pretty important. You know that I was on The Daily Show right at the end, just before The Daily Show ended. They sent a crew with Al Madrigal to do a little 2.5-hour brutal interview with me, and then they patched it all together. You can go to online to the Daily Show and just type in The Chosen Ones. That's why they called that episode The Chosen Ones. You are the chosen ones. Iowans choose the President of the United States, according to Jon Stewart and also Al Madrigal. It's not really true. We kind of end up picking the top 3 that we think are pretty good. And you don't have to come in first. You can come in second or third. But if you come in 4th in Iowa, since 1972, you're not going to get the nomination of your party. I mean, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? I mean, we do a pretty good job, I think, choosing the top 3 out of often a field of many, many candidates. Which brings me to 2015, because many, many candidates is kind of the theme of this year's Republican caucuses. 17, we're down to now 15, I think. And I wanted to tell you why the Republican Party is having such a problem narrowing the field. And the reason is that in American politics now, the Supreme Court has said that money cannot be limited. There no longer is such a thing as campaign finance reform. The Supreme Court ruling said that corporations and labor unions and other groups are people too, and that they have a First Amendment right to free speech. And for most organizations, free speech really means spending money to get their message out, right? I mean, the Supreme Court basically interpreted free speech in the First Amendment to the Constitution as meaning the right for you to buy television time and, I guess, internet time and send out a lot of information. And so it means that we have an avalanche of money. And what's happened this year, it's really very strange, is that all of these 15 or 17 Republican candidates, and at one point at least 3 or 4 Democrats, they each had their own millionaire or billionaire who wanted to fund them. Because it's like horse racing, you know, if you bet on a horse that doesn't have that great a chance of winning, but it happens to win, you get a big payback. And so that's why some of the candidates that are not doing very well are still getting a lot of money from political action committees and from wealthy individuals and companies. Actually, we don't know who's giving the money because the Supreme Court ruling also said that for certain types of political action committees, the money could be secret. You don't have to report it. We don't know who's giving it. But that means that it's hard for us to get the field narrowed because most of these people running have enough money to continue to run, even though their poll numbers are poor. I mean, Bobby Jindal, to me, is an amazing puzzle because his poll numbers are terrible, and yet he still his political action committee, which he doesn't even control, is running ads in Iowa saying, you know, that he's moving up in the polls and so on, so they can stay in. And that's not really very good for the democratic process because we need to narrow the field so there's a limited number of candidates so we can understand what the choices are. You know, I mean, when you go into a supermarket and you go to the cereal aisle, you'd better know what cereal you like, otherwise you're going to spend several nights at Hy-Vee sleeping in the aisle because there are so many. It's hard to make a choice. And I think it's the same thing with presidential candidates. If there are just too many of them, people have a hard time picking the one that they think might do a good job because the choices are so big and people say, well, this one looks pretty good, well, that one looks pretty good. So this is a big problem. The second thing that is amazing this year, and I get phone calls, as I said, from media all over the place. I got a call from Deutsche Welle. I speak German. My parents were German immigrants, and we spoke German at home. And the guy from Deutsche Welle, which is the largest radio station in Germany, said to me, I need to ask you a question. Our listeners want to know, how is it possible that a socialist is running for president as a Democrat in the United States? I mean, the United States is a country that really, socialism is not something that connects very well, and it's almost a dirty word with a lot of Americans. So I tried to explain to him how Bernie Sanders, who is kind of not a Democrat, really, he's a socialist, how he's running for president and how that's working out for him because he's doing quite well. Not as well as he was before the vice president decided not to run, because that was the other most intriguing part was, you know, is the vice president going to run or not? And of course that was very exciting. Now he's decided not to run. That's given Hillary Clinton, I think, you know, a little bit of more forward motion. But this German radio station just couldn't figure out how Americans were actually supporting a socialist. So that's an interesting thing, I think. And of course, the last thing, which is really a puzzle, and I can't answer it, but I've tried to look at data and stuff, but the data is very interesting. How two people who have never run for office and never held office in the Republican Party are taking almost 50% of all the poll numbers. I mean, between Ben Carson and Donald Trump, 50% of the Republican respondents to polls support those two. How is that possible? I mean, what is it that Donald Trump has that attracts the attention of people. And one of the things we discovered is that it's actually a very large percentage of the people who support him are people who loved and followed his reality show, and they seem to think that this is still a reality show. I mean, there were polls done, really. They think that the guy who said you're fired, The Apprentice, is what is going on. And they're not shocked by what Donald Trump says, because they like the way he ran his reality show. He was rude, he was powerful, he was the greatest in the world, and the poll numbers seem to indicate that that is giving him a real boost, and something that nobody else is going to be able to take away, right? Because he's the only guy who ever hosted that show. I mean, maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger will, get this boost in the future, but he can't run for president. As you know, he was not born in the US, and so Arnold Schwarzenegger can't run for president, which a lot of people are saying, gee, I wish he could, because it might be, better than what we have, because he was at least the governor of one of the largest states in the country. Dr. Ben Carson is another very puzzling candidate. Obviously, the answer to why he's so popular, and the East Coast media, they're stupid. I mean, the East Coast media are, first of all, they're lazy. They don't do their research. They don't bother to even Google anything. And then when they Google it, they don't understand what they're finding. Because it's very easy to understand. If you saw my quote in the Boston Globe, which was then quoted in other places, the reason Dr. Ben Carson is so popular is because his books and his lectures and his film have been very popular among Christian conservatives, and especially homeschoolers, okay? For years, long before he ever decided to run for president, they liked his message, they liked his story about growing up with a large family and kind of becoming a very successful and famous surgeon. And so all of a sudden he runs for president. The people who always admired him now support him because they just admire him. And that's again something that I think no one can take away from him, because nobody else has the story. And now they're attacking him and finding all kinds of discrepancies and things about the pyramids being grain storage bins as opposed to burial places, and was he or was he not really offered admission to West Point? We can kind of say, geez, that's really amazing, what a discrepancy. But I think the people who like him, love him actually, and support him are going to dismiss it as being a personal attack against him. I'm using my hands the way Bernie Sanders does. I apologize for that. I put my hands in my pocket here. I think that it's probably not going to actually make that much of a difference. I listened to Rush Limbaugh because it's my job to understand how all the different political groups and media in this country view things, right? So I listened to Rush Limbaugh. And Rush Limbaugh went nuts this week over the attacks on Ben Carson. I mean, he went totally crazy and attacked the news media and said that this was a basically digital assassination and so on. So if you don't understand what's going on this year in American politics, welcome home, because I don't understand what's going on this year either, and I've been doing this for 45 years. Let's cut it off here, and if you have a comment or question, can we do that? Can we take a question or two and then wrap it up? Yeah, I think so. Anybody? Boom? Yes? No? Yes?
Is there any hope of finding out who's getting their taxes reduced by donating the...
There's no hope.
We can't find that out.
There's just no hope this year. There's no hope on anything. Who's getting their taxes reduced, what tax plan is going to work or not, no. It's all too muddled, because this year, the campaigns are really not about policy, right? The campaigns are about attacks during debates, and they're about personalities. And, you know, we don't really have a good kind of a substantive policy orientation on any of this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll talk to you. Sign up for this thing, will you?